I served as Lieutenant Commander on the USS Hawkstone for 3 years. Nothing in my service record prepared me for what happened. The pickup was routine. We received orders to surface near coordinates 37 degrees north, 74 degrees west. Department of Defense contractor needed transport to the research facility. I was on the bridge when he came aboard. Arthur Graves, civilian contractor, clearance confirmed. Single briefcase, Navy windbreaker, too clean. Something felt wrong from the moment he stepped through the hatch. Graves moved differently. Steps measured, precise. When I introduced myself, he looked directly at me and never blinked. "Lieutenant Commander," he said. His voice was flat, professional. "I appreciate the transport. This mission is critical to national security." I asked about his destination. Scientists usually talk about their work. Contractors mention equipment specs. Graves just repeated that the mission was critical. Chief Petty Officer Thompson ran communications. Charlie had been with us for 2 years, ever since his transfer from the Pacific Fleet. Always carried photos of his girlfriend Sarah and talked about the fishing boat he was saving up to buy back in Ohio. He approached me after Graves went below deck, running his fingers over that scar on his left hand, a nervous habit I'd noticed whenever something bothered him. "Something odd about the passenger, sir," Thompson said. "Asked me about crew manifest numbers, wanted to know exactly how many people were aboard. And sir?" He was looking at me like he was memorizing my face. "Passengers don't need crew information." I made a note to watch him. We submerged at 2 p.m., 18 hours to destination, normal watch rotations. At 4:30 p.m., Graves appeared in the control room without authorization. "Lieutenant Commander," he said, "I need to inspect the crew quarters." I explained passenger area restrictions. He could remain in quarters or visit the mess hall during designated hours. He nodded once and walked away without arguing. At 6 p.m., Thompson reported strange radio signals. Brief bursts on multiple frequencies. Nothing intelligible, just static patterns that seemed almost like code. "Could be interference from the facility," Thompson said. "But I've never heard anything like this before." I checked our position. We were still 12 hours from the facility coordinates, too far for interference. At 10 p.m., I was conducting final rounds. I found Graves standing outside the crew quarters. He wasn't moving, just standing there like he was listening to something. "Mr. Graves," I said, "is there a problem?" He turned toward me with that same measured movement. "No problem, Lieutenant Commander. Just familiarizing myself with the layout." The corridor was dimly lit, but I could see his eyes clearly. They reflected the overhead lights like an animal's eyes would. Just for a second, then back to normal. I escorted him back to his quarters and made another log entry. Something was definitely wrong with our passenger. I woke to reports of missing crew. Thompson's bunk was empty, regulation corners, but no Thompson. "Sir, communications specialist Thompson is unaccounted for," Rodriguez reported. "His watch ended at 0400. He never returned to quarters. I ordered a full search. 27 compartments, every space large enough to hold a person. Thompson wasn't on the submarine. We were 300 feet under. There was no place for him to go. Emergency muster in the mess hall. 23 sailors. We should have had 24. Anyone seen Thompson since his communications watch?" I asked. Blank stares. No one remembered seeing Thompson after midnight. No one remembered him at all. Seaman Martinez spoke up. "Sir, who's Thompson?" That stopped me cold. Martinez had worked directly with Thompson for 6 months. "Communication specialist," I said. "Thompson. Charlie Thompson. Been with us for 2 years." The crew looked confused, like I was talking about someone who never existed. Manifest, service file, personal effects, all present. No one remembered him. I found Graves in the galley drinking coffee. He looked up when I approached. "Problem, Lieutenant Commander?" he asked. "Missing crew member," I said. "Thompson, communications specialist." Graves tilted his head slightly. "I don't recall anyone by that name." I showed him the crew manifest with Thompson's name clearly listed. Graves read it carefully, then looked back at me. "Must be a clerical error," he said. "Personnel records sometimes contain mistakes." But it wasn't a mistake. Thompson's gear was real. His logbook entries were real. I had conversations with him just yesterday. Now everyone else acted like he never existed. I tried the radio to contact Fleet Command. Thompson worked the frequencies, but something was wrong with our long-range communications. We could receive, but our transmissions weren't getting through. At 11 a.m., Seaman Carter approached me. "Sir, I need to report something strange," Carter said. "I keep having this feeling like I'm forgetting someone important." Finally, someone else who sensed something wrong. "What kind of feeling?" I asked. "Like there should be another person on communications duty," Carter said. "But I can't remember who. It's driving me crazy." I asked Carter to help me search Thompson's belongings. We found Thompson's personal photos in his footlocker, pictures of his family back in Ohio. Carter stared at the photos for a long time. "I remember these pictures," Carter said slowly. "Someone showed them to me before, but I can't remember who." The memories were there, just buried somehow, like someone had carefully removed Thompson from everyone's mind while leaving empty spaces where he used to be. At 2 p.m., we had another problem. Seaman Williams was missing from his post in the engine room. Bobby Williams, the kid from Texas who couldn't stop talking about his motorcycle and always hummed country songs while he worked. Chief Martinez went to find him and came back looking confused. "Sir, there's no Seaman Williams on this boat," Martinez reported. But I could hear him humming Sweet Caroline just that morning, off-key as always. I checked the crew manifest again. Williams's name was gone, like it had been erased. I gathered the remaining crew, 22 sailors now. I asked if anyone remembered Williams. Nothing. Complete blank stares. By the third disappearance, I knew this was beyond standard explanations. Petty Officer Davis vanished during afternoon watch. Jimmy Davis, the quiet sonar operator who read paperback novels during breaks and never missed his mother's birthday, he always marked it on the duty roster calendar in red ink. One moment monitoring sonar, the next, empty station. The crew looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Sir, we don't have a Davis on the crew," Seaman Miller said. "Never have." But I had Davis's sonar logs from that morning. His handwriting was distinct, left-handed slant that I recognized immediately. And there, on the calendar, in red ink, Mom's B-Day, marked for next Tuesday. I started keeping my own records. Thompson, Scarred, Communications, Williams, Engine Room, Davis, Sonar. 21 crew members remained. The submarine operated normally, like we'd always had exactly 21 sailors. That's when I noticed the pattern. Each disappearance happened after the crew member had direct contact with Graves. Thompson had spoken with him about communications. Williams had been assigned to escort Graves through the engine room. Davis had shown him the sonar equipment. I confronted him in his quarters at 4 p.m. "We need to talk," I said. Graves looked up from his briefcase. "Of course, Lieutenant Commander. How can I assist you?" "3 of my crew members are missing. All 3 had contact with you before they disappeared." "I'm not sure what you mean," Graves said. "Your crew roster has been consistent since I came aboard." I showed him my written notes, names, descriptions, evidence that these people existed. Graves read the notes carefully, then looked back at me with something that might have been curiosity. "These are detailed fabrications," he said, "very creative, but personnel records don't support your claims." "I'm not fabricating anything," I said. "You're doing something to my crew." "Lieutenant Commander, I think you may be experiencing stress-related hallucinations. Command stress can cause false memories, particularly in confined environments. But I knew what I had seen. I knew who was missing. At 6 p.m., I gathered the remaining crew for an emergency meeting. I explained the situation as clearly as possible. Some of your shipmates have disappeared. I know this sounds impossible, but I need you to trust me. Think carefully about whether we're missing anyone." The sailors looked confused, exchanged glances like they thought I was having a breakdown. Chief Martinez spoke up, absently adjusting his reading glasses, a habit from years of poring over engine schematics. "Sir, with respect, our crew complement has been steady. No one's missing." "What about Thompson, the communications specialist?" "Sir, Seaman Carter handles communications, always has. I tried a different approach. Has anyone noticed gaps in your memory? Feelings like you're forgetting something important?" This got a reaction. Several sailors shifted uncomfortably. "Now that you mention it," Seaman Johnson said, "I keep feeling like someone should be in the engine room with me. But I can't figure out who." "I have the same feeling about sonar duty," Miller added, "like there should be another operator." The memories were buried, but traces remained. Emotional impressions, muscle memory, familiar routines that no longer made sense. At 8 p.m., Graves appeared in the control room again. "Lieutenant Commander, I'd like to tour the torpedo room," he said. I wasn't letting him near any more of my crew. "Torpedo room is restricted," I said. "Passenger access is limited to designated areas." "I have special authorization," Graves said. He produced a document from his briefcase, Department of Defense letterhead, proper signatures, clearance codes that checked out. The authorization was legitimate. I had no grounds to refuse. "Fine," I said. "But I'm escorting you personally." Graves smiled for the first time since coming aboard. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Of course, Lieutenant Commander. I wouldn't want it any other way." I escorted Graves to the torpedo room at 2100, most secured compartment, 24 Mark 48 torpedoes in their racks. "Impressive weapons," Graves said, examining each torpedo like he was conducting an inspection. "Mr. Graves, what exactly is your business with the research facility?" "Efficiency improvements," Graves said. "Eliminating redundancies. I've optimized over 200 individuals." The way he said it made my skin crawl, like he was talking about equipment, not people. That's when I saw them. 3 figures standing motionless between the torpedo racks. Thompson, Williams, Davis. They were just standing there, perfectly still, staring at nothing. Thompson's fingers hung loose at his sides, no nervous touching of that scar on his left hand. Williams stood silent, no humming, no off-key singing. Davis held his head straight, no longer favoring his left side like he always did when concentrating. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. Graves didn't seem surprised by my reaction. "You're missing crew members, Lieutenant Commander. They're exactly where they've always been." I approached Thompson slowly. He didn't respond to my presence. I waved my hand in front of his face. Nothing. The man who used to light up talking about Sarah and his fishing boat dreams was gone, replaced by something wearing his uniform. "Thompson," I said. "Charlie Thompson. Sarah's waiting for you back home. Can you hear me?" No response. Charlie Thompson, the real Charlie Thompson, was gone. "What did you do to them?" I asked Graves. "This is impossible," I said. "People don't work this way." He opened his briefcase and removed what looked like a small electronic device. No bigger than a smartphone, covered in controls I didn't recognize. "Each crew member requires individual optimization," Graves explained. "The process takes approximately 6 minutes. Very efficient." "You're talking about mind control." "I'm talking about improvement. Consciousness is software," Graves said. "Software can be modified. These crew members no longer experience fear, doubt, or conflicted loyalties. They follow orders perfectly and never question authority." Graves pointed the device toward me. "Your optimization will be slightly more complex, Lieutenant Commander. Command personnel require additional modifications." I drew my sidearm. "Stay back," I said. "Don't come any closer." Graves looked at my weapon with mild interest. "Lieutenant Commander, your crew members are still alive. Harming me would strand them in their current state permanently. What do you want?" "I want to complete my mission. The research facility is developing similar optimization techniques for military applications. Your submarine will transport the first batch of optimized personnel for field testing." "Field testing?" "Combat operations. Soldiers who never retreat, never question orders, never break under pressure. Perfect military units." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Graves wasn't just experimenting on my crew. He was planning to create an army of these things. "The Navy will never approve this," I said. "The Navy already has approved this," Graves said. He showed me another document from his briefcase. Official Pentagon letterhead, classified project codes, authorization signatures from people I recognized. "This is a legitimate military operation, Lieutenant Commander. You can cooperate, or you can be optimized like the rest of your crew." I kept my weapon trained on him while processing this information. If Graves was telling the truth, if this was an official military project, then resisting could be considered mutiny. But looking at Thompson, Williams, and Davis standing like empty shells between the torpedo racks, I knew I couldn't let this continue. "No," I said. "Whatever this is, it's wrong." Graves raised his device again. "Then you leave me no choice, Lieutenant Commander." I fired 6 rounds center mass. Graves stumbled but didn't fall, dark fluid spreading across his chest. The wounds weren't bleeding properly. Too dark, too thick. Impressive reaction time, but small arms fire is ineffective against my current configuration. "What are you?" I demanded. "I'm exactly what I appear to be," Graves said. "A Department of Defense contractor conducting authorized research." He raised the device again, a low hum that set my teeth on edge and made the lights stutter. I dove behind a torpedo rack as the signal intensified. The sound was getting inside my head, making it difficult to think clearly. Thompson, Williams, and Davis turned toward me in perfect unison. Their movements were mechanical, synchronized, like puppets controlled by the same strings. "The optimization process is beginning," Graves announced. "Please remain still. Resistance only prolongs the procedure." I had to get out of the torpedo room. Whatever that device was doing, prolonged exposure would turn me into another empty shell. The 3 optimized crew members started moving toward my position. They walked in formation, perfectly coordinated, blocking all exit routes. I grabbed an emergency flare from the torpedo loading equipment and ignited it. The compartment filled with bright red light and chemical smoke. "Temporary countermeasures will not prevent optimization," Graves said, but his voice sounded slightly distorted now, like a radio signal with interference. The flare was affecting his device somehow. The signal frequency was fluctuating, and the 3 crew members looked confused for the first time since their optimization. I needed to reach the emergency communication panel near the compartment entrance. I threw the flare toward the far end of the compartment and ran for the communication panel while Graves was tracking the light source. The panel was standard Navy equipment, emergency frequencies, direct links to fleet command, submarine distress protocols. I activated the emergency beacon and started transmitting. "This is Lieutenant Commander Arthur Brennan, USS Hawkstone. We have a hostile aboard our vessel. Request immediate assistance." Static filled the speaker. Then Graves' voice came through the communication system. "Fleet Command, this is Department of Defense contractor Arthur Graves. Lieutenant Commander Brennan is experiencing a psychological episode. He has discharged his weapon and is making false emergency reports." That was impossible. Graves was standing 20 feet away from me. He couldn't be speaking through the communication system. "Brennan has been under extreme stress during this mission," Graves continued through the radio. "I recommend immediate medical evaluation upon return to port." I tried to override the transmission, but Graves' signal was stronger. Whatever technology he was using, it could hijack our communication systems. "Fleet Command, do not trust the contractor," I transmitted. "He's done something to my crew. 3 men are missing." Lieutenant Commander Brennan's crew complement has been consistent throughout this mission, Graves responded. Personnel records will confirm no crew members are missing. I realized what was happening. Graves wasn't just optimizing people on the submarine, he was connected to larger systems. He could alter records, communications, maybe even fleet command databases. The flare was burning out. The red light was fading, and Graves's device was stabilizing. Thompson, Williams, and Davis were moving toward me again. I had one option left. The torpedo room had manual flood controls, emergency systems that could seal the compartment and flood it with seawater in case of fire or explosion. If I could activate the flood system, maybe the water would disrupt Graves' device. The flood controls were located near the torpedo loading mechanisms, past Graves and the 3 optimized crew members. I drew my backup weapon and started moving. "Lieutenant Commander, your resistance is noted in my mission report," Graves said. "However, optimization is inevitable. You cannot prevent the completion of this project. Watch me," I said, and opened fire. The 3 crew members moved to intercept my gunfire. They didn't try to avoid the bullets. They just absorbed the impacts like they were wearing body armor, but they were still physically human. The rounds slowed them down, made them stumble. That gave me enough time to reach the flood controls. I activated the emergency sequence. Warning lights flashed throughout the compartment as seawater began rushing in through the flood valves. "Interesting tactic," Graves said, "but water will not damage my equipment." The seawater was rising quickly. That's when I noticed something strange about the 3 optimized crew members. As the water reached their waists, they started moving differently, less coordinated. The signal was weakening. "Thompson," I called out. "Charlie Thompson, can you hear me?" Thompson turned toward my voice. For just a moment, there was recognition in his eyes. His hand moved slightly, fingers touching that scar. "Lieutenant Commander?" His voice was weak, confused, but definitely human. "Sarah. I was supposed to call Sarah tonight. What happened to me?" Graves looked at his device. The display was flickering as the emergency lighting interfered with the electronics. I could hear a faint electronic whine coming from the device, getting higher in pitch. "Temporary system interference," he said. "Optimization will resume once conditions stabilize." But the water was rising faster than he expected, and something else was happening. The 3 crew members were starting to remember who they were. Chapter 6. Breaking Point. The seawater reached waist level. Thompson, Williams, and Davis were fully aware now, looking around the flooding compartment with growing panic. "What's happening?" Williams shouted over the sound of rushing water. "How did we get down here?" "The contractor," I yelled back. "He did something to you. We need to get out of here." Graves was still standing calmly in the rising water, but his device was sparking and smoking. Whatever technology he was using, it wasn't designed for submarine flood conditions. "This is a temporary setback," Graves said. "My equipment has backup systems." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a second device, identical to the first, but this one was sealed in a waterproof housing. "No," I said, raising my weapon again. But Graves wasn't aiming the device at me. He was pointing it at the 3 recovered crew members. Thompson collapsed first. His eyes went blank again, and he stopped moving. Williams and Davis followed seconds later, dropping into the water like their strings had been cut. "The water provided temporary interference," Graves explained, "but properly shielded equipment eliminates that problem." I fired at the waterproof device, but rounds skittered harmlessly from its sealed shell. The water was still rising. Soon it would reach the overhead pipes and electrical systems. If I didn't stop the flooding, we would all drown. But if I stopped the flooding, Graves would optimize the rest of my crew. "You're going to kill everyone on this submarine," I said. "Death is inefficient," Graves replied. "Optimization preserves the biological systems while improving functionality. That's not living. That's slavery." That's evolution. Humans are naturally inefficient. Too many conflicting drives, too much wasted mental energy on irrelevant concerns. Optimization eliminates these problems. The 3 crew members were standing motionless in the chest-deep water, completely unresponsive to their environment. They would drown if the water rose much higher. I waded over to the flood control panel and activated the emergency pumps. The water level immediately stopped rising and began to recede. "Practical decision," Graves said. "These crew members represent significant training investments. Destroying them would be wasteful." As the water drained away, I could see that Thompson, Williams, and Davis were breathing, but still completely unresponsive. The optimization had taken hold again. "Now," Graves said, "we can proceed with your optimization." He aimed the device at me again. This time there was no cover, no distractions, no way to avoid the signal. I felt the frequency penetrating my thoughts. It was like having someone else's voice in my head, speaking over my own internal dialogue. "Submit to optimization. Resistance is inefficient. Individual will is unnecessary." I fought against the signal, but it was getting stronger. My vision was starting to blur. My thoughts were becoming sluggish. That's when I heard alarms throughout the submarine. Someone was in the control room, broadcasting on the emergency frequency. "Mayday, Mayday, this is USS Hawkstone. We are taking on water in the torpedo room. Crew members are missing. Request immediate assistance." It was Chief Martinez. Somehow he had avoided Graves's optimization and was calling for help. Graves frowned for the first time since coming aboard. That should not be possible. All crew members have been accounted for. The device signal weakened as Graves divided his attention between optimizing me and dealing with Martinez. I used the distraction to grab an emergency oxygen tank from the torpedo loading equipment. The tank was pressurized, heavy enough to use as a weapon. I swung the tank at Graves's device with everything I had left. The impact shattered the waterproof housing. Sparks flew from the electronic components, and the signal died completely. Thompson, Williams, and Davis immediately collapsed, but this time they were breathing normally. The optimization effect was broken. Graves stared at his destroyed device with what looked like genuine surprise. "Impressive," he said, "but I have additional resources." He opened his briefcase again, but this time I was ready. I hit him with the oxygen tank before he could reach another device. Graves went down hard. Dark fluid leaked from his mouth and nose, but he was still moving. "You cannot stop this project," he said. "I am one of dozens of contractors working on optimization technology. Even if you eliminate me, others will continue the research." "Maybe," I said, "but they won't be doing it on my submarine." I grabbed the emergency axe from the torpedo room damage control station and brought it down on Graves's briefcase. The electronic equipment inside sparked and died. Without the devices, Graves began to deteriorate. The dark fluid leaked faster from his wounds. His movements became erratic, mechanical, like a machine losing power. I could hear a faint clicking sound coming from inside his chest, like gears winding down. "Lieutenant Commander." His voice was distorting. "You understand what you've just done? This submarine is carrying the most advanced military technology in human history. By destroying my equipment, you've committed treason against the United States." "If this is what the United States wants," I said, "then maybe it's time for treason." Graves collapsed. Whatever he was, destroying his control systems had finally stopped him. But his words were still echoing in my head. If this was an official military project, if the Pentagon had authorized human optimization experiments, then I had just killed a federal contractor and destroyed classified equipment. I would face court-martial, prison, possibly execution for treason, unless I could prove that Graves was something other than human. I was dragging Graves' body toward the torpedo loading area when Thompson regained consciousness. "Lieutenant Commander," he said weakly, "what happened?" I remember being on communications duty, then nothing. You were optimized, I said. Mind control, but it's over now. Williams and Davis were stirring too, looking around at the damaged torpedo room with confusion. They remembered their regular duties but had no memory of the missing time. "Sir, who's the dead guy?" Davis asked, pointing at Graves. "Department of Defense contractor. He was experimenting on the crew." Martinez's voice came over the intercom. "Lieutenant Commander, I've got Fleet Command on the radio. They're asking about our emergency transmission. I needed to handle this carefully. If Graves was telling the truth about Pentagon authorization, my actions could be interpreted as mutiny." "Tell them we had a medical emergency," I said. "Civilian contractors suffered an accident in the torpedo room. We're stabilizing the situation." "Copy that, sir." I examined Graves' body more carefully. The wounds from my gunfire were strange. Too clean, too precise, like they had been designed rather than caused by bullets. The dark fluid leaking from his mouth wasn't blood. It was thicker, more viscous, with an oily sheen that didn't look biological. I used the emergency medical kit to collect samples of the fluid. If I could prove that Graves wasn't human, it might justify my actions. Thompson was checking his equipment. "Sir, my communication logs show signals I don't remember sending. Strange frequency patterns, like someone was using our equipment for unauthorized transmissions." That confirmed my suspicions. Graves had been manipulating our systems, possibly communicating with his handlers throughout the mission. "Can you trace where those signals were going?" I asked. "I can try, sir, but the transmission logs are corrupted, like someone tried to erase them." I gathered the crew in the torpedo room to brief them on what had happened. They needed to understand the situation before we reached the surface. For the past 18 hours, this contractor was experimenting on crew members, I explained. He was using some kind of mind control technology to turn people into programmable soldiers. The sailors looked skeptical. Mind control sounded like science fiction. "I know how it sounds," I said. "But you all experienced missing time. You have gaps in your memory. That's evidence of what he was doing." Williams nodded slowly. I remember feeling confused about my duty schedule, like there were people missing from our rotations. "Same here," Davis added. "I kept thinking we should have more sonar operators, but I couldn't remember who." The crew was starting to piece together the missing memories, emotional impressions, familiar routines that no longer made sense, the feeling that important people had been erased from their lives. I showed them Graves's documentation, the Pentagon authorization, the research facility coordinates, the classified project codes. "This might be a legitimate military operation," I said. "If it is, what I did could be considered treason. But I believe this man was not human, and his experiments were a threat to national security." Martinez spoke up. "Sir, what do you want us to do?" "Tell the truth," I said. "When we reach port, there will be an investigation. Tell them exactly what you remember. The missing time, the confusion, the feeling that people were disappearing." "What about his body?" Thompson asked. That was the critical question. Graves's corpse was evidence of whatever he really was, but it was also evidence that I had killed a federal contractor. "We preserve it," I said. "Medical examination might prove he wasn't human." At noon, we surfaced near the research facility coordinates. No facility was visible on the surface, just empty ocean. I tried to contact the facility on the radio. No response. According to our navigation equipment, we were at the exact coordinates listed in Graves' documentation. "Sir," Thompson said, "I'm not picking up any radio signals from this location." No facility, no other vessels, nothing. The research facility didn't exist. That changed everything. If there was no facility, then Graves's mission was fabricated. The Pentagon authorization might be forged. The entire operation could be unauthorized. I ordered a full search of Graves's belongings. His briefcase contained additional devices, all of them destroyed when I smashed the case. But we also found something else. Hidden in the briefcase lining was a small data storage device, encrypted but intact. "Thompson, can you crack this encryption?" I asked. "I can try, sir, but it might take some time." While Thompson worked on the data device, I examined Graves' body again. The wounds were definitely not normal. The entry holes were too round, too clean. The tissue damage looked artificial, synthetic tissue stretched over metal. "Sir," Thompson called out, "I cracked the encryption. You need to see this." The data device contained mission files, technical specifications, and communication logs. But the most important file was a personnel manifest. It listed dozens of names: military contractors, Pentagon officials, research facility staff. All of them were marked as optimization candidates or conversion complete. I scrolled through page after page of names I recognized, people I'd served with, people I trusted. Then I reached the bottom of the list. Lieutenant Commander Arthur Brennan, priority optimization target. Command authority makes him valuable for fleet-wide implementation. This wasn't a Pentagon operation. This was an infiltration. Something was systematically replacing key military personnel with optimized versions, and I was supposed to be next. I was studying the personnel manifest when our radio crackled to life. "USS Hawkstone, this is Admiral Morrison, Pacific Fleet Command. Report your status immediately." Admiral Morrison. I knew that voice. I had served under Morrison for 6 months during my previous assignment, but something about his tone was wrong, too flat, too controlled. "Admiral, this is Lieutenant Commander Brennan. We had an incident with the civilian contractor. He's deceased." "Understood, Lieutenant Commander. What was the nature of the incident?" I chose my words carefully. If Morrison was compromised, revealing too much information could be dangerous. "Medical emergency during transport, sir. The contractor suffered fatal injuries in the torpedo room." "I see. Lieutenant Commander, you will maintain current position and prepare for immediate extraction. A recovery team is en route to your location." We were hundreds of miles from the nearest naval base. No recovery team could reach us in 30 minutes. "Sir, what's our ETA for extraction?" I asked. 30 minutes, Lieutenant Commander. The recovery vessel is already in your area." "Impossible. There had been no other ships on our sonar for the past 12 hours. I motioned for Thompson to check sonar readings. He ran a full sweep and shook his head. "No contacts." "Admiral, we're not showing any vessels on sonar," I reported. "The recovery vessel is using stealth technology, Lieutenant Commander. You will not detect it on standard equipment." Morrison's voice was becoming more mechanical with each transmission, just like Graves had sounded when his device was malfunctioning. I checked the personnel manifest again. Admiral Morrison's name was on the list, marked as conversion complete. "Sir, can you confirm your authorization code?" I asked. Standard protocol required senior officers to provide authentication codes for unusual orders. Morrison should have known this. "Authorization is not required for this operation," Morrison said. "You will comply with extraction orders." No admiral would refuse to provide authentication codes. Morrison was compromised. I cut the radio transmission and gathered my crew. "We have a problem," I said. "Fleet Command has been infiltrated. The people giving us orders are not human." The crew looked skeptical again, but the evidence was mounting. "Thompson, show them the personnel manifest," I said. Thompson displayed the list on his tablet. Dozens of military officials marked as converted or targeted for optimization. "According to this data, whatever replaced Graves has been systematically infiltrating the Navy," I said. "Senior officers, base commanders, even Pentagon officials." "Sir, what are our orders?" Martinez asked. "We can't trust Fleet Command," I said. "We can't trust the Pentagon. We're on our own." That's when sonar detected new contacts. "Sir," Davis said, his voice hollow, "I'm reading multiple contacts, large signatures approaching from multiple directions." I looked at the sonar display. 7 signatures, closing on our position from different bearings. Fast approach, coordinated timing. How long until intercept? I asked. 15 minutes, sir. They're moving faster than any submarine I've tracked. When we reached periscope depth, I saw them. Ships arranged in a loose circle around our position. They looked like Navy vessels from a distance, but something was wrong with their proportions. Too clean, too precise, like someone had built ships based on photographs without understanding what made them real. Sir, I'm counting multiple surface contacts, Thompson reported. His voice was shaking. They're broadcasting Navy identification codes, but the serial numbers don't exist in any database. We were surrounded by ships that shouldn't exist. The radio crackled again. This time it was a different voice. Lieutenant Commander Brennan, this is Captain Williams, USS Enterprise. You are ordered to surface immediately and prepare for boarding. Captain Williams was on the personnel manifest, listed as converted 3 months ago. Sir, what are your orders? Martinez asked. I looked around at my crew, Thompson, Williams, Davis, Martinez, and 18 other sailors who had trusted me to get them home safely. If I surrendered, they would be optimized, turned into empty shells programmed to follow orders without question. If I fought, we would probably die, but at least we would die human. Battle stations, I said. Load all torpedo tubes. Sir, we're heavily outnumbered, Martinez said, unconsciously cleaning his glasses again. I know the odds, Chief, but I'd rather go down fighting than become one of those things. The crew moved to their stations without argument. They understood what we were facing. Thompson, can you send a message to the real Navy? I asked. Something that will warn them about the infiltration. I can try, sir, but these ships are jamming most frequencies. Try anyway. If we're going down, someone needs to know what happened here. As Thompson worked on the transmission, I studied the enemy formation. 7 ships in a perfect circle. No human fleet would arrange itself that way. Whatever these things were, they thought like machines. Precise, efficient, optimized. That might be their weakness. I was staring at the impossible fleet when Thompson made contact with Norfolk. Sir, I've got a clear channel to Norfolk Naval Base. Real Norfolk. Send everything, I said. The personnel manifest, Graves' mission files, our coordinates. Tell them the Pacific Fleet has been infiltrated. But as Thompson transmitted, I realized something was wrong with our situation. Sir, Davis reported, checking his instruments. Those 7 ships, they're not moving like normal vessels. I looked through the periscope again. The ships maintained their perfect circle, but something about their positioning seemed off, too precise. A low electronic tone started coming from Davis's sonar console. I'd never heard that tone before. Sir, I'm losing them on sonar, Davis said. Signals getting weaker, like they're fading. Thompson, are you still getting their radio transmissions? Negative, sir. All frequencies went quiet about 10 minutes ago. I watched through the periscope as the ships began to disappear in the distance, not sailing away, not diving, just becoming harder to see, like they were dissolving into the horizon. The air above them shimmered slightly, like heat distortion. The water around where they'd been showed no wake, no disturbance. Sir, Thompson whispered, I don't think those were ships. Within an hour, the ocean around us was empty. No contacts on sonar, no radio transmissions. Like the 7 vessels had never existed at all. Thompson, can you still reach Norfolk? I asked. Yes, sir. Admiral Chen is standing by. Put him through. Lieutenant Commander Brennan, this is Admiral Chen. We received your transmission. Are you certain of this intelligence? But as Chen spoke, I noticed something in his voice. The same flat tone, the same mechanical cadence. I checked the personnel manifest again. Admiral Chen's name wasn't on the list. I thought about every conversation I'd had with Chen. His responses always came too quickly, too perfectly suited to what I needed to hear. because Admiral Chen didn't exist. "Sir," Davis reported, "I'm showing massive sonar contacts approaching from the east. Atlantic Fleet assets, just like the Admiral promised. But I knew what we would see when they arrived. More ships like the 7 above us. More things pretending to be human vessels, sent by people pretending to be human commanders." "How long until they reach us?" I asked. 6 hours, sir." I looked around at my crew. They were still human, still real. For now. "Well," I said, "I guess we wait." But I knew we weren't waiting for rescue. We were waiting for the optimization to begin all over again. The Atlantic Fleet arrived 6 hours later, 12 destroyers and 2 aircraft carriers, more firepower than I had ever seen in one place. Admiral Chen came aboard the Hawkstone personally. He brought forensic specialists, intelligence officers, and a medical team that spent 3 hours examining Graves's remains. "Walk me through everything that happened," Chen said. I told him the complete story. Graves boarding the submarine, the crew disappearances, the optimization process, the impossible fleet. Chen listened without interruption, taking notes on a tablet. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Lieutenant Commander, what you're describing represents a fundamental threat to national security," he said finally. "But it's also the kind of report that could end a career." "I have evidence, sir. Graves's body, the personnel manifest, my crew's testimony, and we'll examine all of it. But I need you to understand something. If this investigation confirms your account, you'll never serve on a normal submarine again. You'll never have a normal military career. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Thompson's empty eyes, about Williams and Davis standing like mannequins in the torpedo room, about the voice that sounded like Graves coming through our communication system. "Yes, sir. I'm prepared." Chen's team spent 2 weeks aboard the Hawkstone. They interviewed every crew member separately. They analyzed Graves' synthetic tissue samples. The results were classified beyond my clearance level. Finally, Chen called me to his office. "The investigation has confirmed your report. We've identified multiple compromised personnel in Pacific Fleet Command. The infiltration was more extensive than anyone realized." "What about the ships?" "Gone. No trace they ever existed except for your sonar recordings." Chen handed me a classified folder. "Project Sentinel. We're forming a task force to investigate similar infiltrations." I opened the folder. My new rank was Commander. "Sir, why me?" "Because you've seen them operate. You proved they can be stopped." I thought about the optimization process, about people disappearing from reality itself, about voices that sounded human but weren't. "Sir, how extensive is this infiltration?" "We don't know," Chen said. "But based on the manifest you recovered, it may reach the highest levels of government. Your job is to find out how high." That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've investigated 17 suspected infiltration cases, military bases where personnel go missing and nobody remembers them, research facilities conducting unauthorized experiments on human consciousness, government officials who speak and move like machines. The enemy is still out there. They're patient, methodical, efficient. They don't need to win through force. They just need to replace enough key personnel to control our decision-making processes. Sometimes I wonder if I'm fighting a war that's already lost. How do you defeat an enemy that can erase people from reality? How do you trust anyone when your commanding officers might not be human? But then I remember Thompson's voice when the water broke Graves's control. "Lieutenant Commander, can you hear me?" Human consciousness fighting back against artificial optimization. That's what keeps me going. The knowledge that whatever these things are, they haven't figured out how to completely duplicate human consciousness. There's something in us that resists their programming, something they can't optimize away. I'm writing this report because I may not survive my next assignment. If something happens to me, if I disappear or start acting differently, you'll know why. The enemy is real. The infiltration is ongoing. Trust no one in positions of authority unless you can verify their humanity through direct observation. Watch for the signs. People who move too precisely, voices that sound flat and mechanical, orders that don't make tactical sense, personnel who disappear and are forgotten by everyone except you. If you encounter these anomalies, document everything. Record names, dates, circumstances. Physical evidence is crucial because they can alter digital records. And remember, they're not invincible. Water disrupts their control signals. High-powered radio jamming breaks their coordination. They can be killed with conventional weapons. But most importantly, human consciousness can resist their optimization. As long as people remember who they are, who they've lost, and what they're fighting for, we can beat them. The war for human consciousness isn't over. It's just beginning. Appreciate you tuning in for the chills. Hope this helped you unwind. Share your story ideas in the comments and subscribe to become part of our nocturnal crew. Until next time, take care.